Hi guys, it's Ty and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be doing another recent reads, which is going to be all of the fantasy and sci-fi books that I have recently read. And I haven't really focused a lot on just like fantasy. I don't really read a lot of sci-fi, but I haven't just focused on a lot of fantasy because at some points I think I got burnt out on fantasy. But now I have just been craving a lot of fantasy. If you've been keeping up with the last few hauls that I've done, I've been hauling a lot of fantasy books. So you'll probably be seeing me review a lot more fantasy. So of course I'll be reading everything else, but just know that I'll be sprinkling in a lot more fantasy reviews. So be on the lookout for that if that is something that you are interested in. But normally how I do like my recent reads is I'll start with like my lowest rated and work my way up to my highest rated. Today, I'm just gonna switch it up and just work my way from the one I started with to the one I recently finished up with. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first book that I started with is going to be Root Magic by Eden Royce, and this is going to be a middle grade fantasy book. And this one follows primarily our main character, who is Jezebel. I believe at the beginning of this, she's around 10 years old. She is a twin. Her twin brother's name is Jay. And at the start of this book, their grandmother has recently passed away. And because of that, they are tasked with picking up and learning root work, or in other words, root magic. And because of that, they have started to notice that something supernatural has started to happen around the area that they live. So they have to deal with that. Not only are they dealing with that, but they are also dealing with like a little bit of like police brutality. They are starting to see integration in their area. This book does take place in the early to mid 1960s down in South Carolina. So integrating, Black students in these white schools is a big deal at that time. So they are witnessing that. And then between these twins, they are also dealing with some relationship issues between the two of them, because you would think with them being twins in the same age that they will be in the same grade, but no. Jez is extremely bright and she has been skipped up a grade. So they have started to grow a little distant, and her brother Jay has been making new friends, and so he has been going off with his friends. Jez is having a harder time making friends, and she is experiencing bullying in her class, and so she has been feeling a little left out and a little alone and not as close to her brother. So they are kind of dealing with that, and so we are just following them as they are navigating their brother-sister relationship, as they are learning how to learn root work, and they are trying to figure out what this supernatural presence is and what that actually has to do with root work in their family. And then as they are trying to figure out why this cop is harassing their family. And so I ended up rating this book a 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. I ended up listening to this book on audio, which I would highly recommend. For this to be a middle grade book, there was parts of this that I thought was a little creepy. I thought the audiobook narrator did a fantastic job narrating this, and I would highly check this out on audio if you are interested in picking this one up. But I loved learning about the root work. I'm not familiar with that. Apparently this is actually something that people used to do or still do maybe. So I was really interested in that. I really loved how the author was able to take these harder topics such as racism and police brutality and make it more manageable for a younger audience. I think she did a great job with how she handled those topics. If you can hear the rain in the background, sorry, we're just gonna put it as part of the ambiance for this video. But I really enjoyed how she was able to handle those harder topics. And then I just also liked the relationship between Jez and her brother Jay, and how they were able to navigate that, and how we saw them handle the issues with them not being as close as they were once they started the new year at school. Again, I gave this book a 4 stars, and I would highly, highly recommend. So then the next book that I picked up is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. And this is an adult fantasy novel, and this is the first book in the Drowning Empire series. And so this one primarily it follows our main character by the name of Lynn. And at the very beginning of this, we find out that she has lost all of her memories and she is working really hard to get her memories back because she ultimately wants to try and be the next ruler of this failing empire. But her father won't let her become the next ruler until she gets her memories back. And without her memories, her father also won't allow her to learn bone shard magic. So she has taken it upon herself to kind of learn the magic behind his back. So that is one of the main POVs that we are following. There are also other POVs that we are following throughout this story. One of the other ones that we follow, which is one of my favorites, is Jovis. And in his POV, he is trying to find his lost wife, who has been lost for I think several years at the start of this story. So he is on the search for her, and on his search for her, he has found a companion, and the relationship between those two I absolutely love. We are also following a few other main perspectives, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then we also of course learn exactly what the bone shard magic is, and I ended up absolutely loving this book. I ended up giving this one a 5 out of 5 stars. When I picked this up, I had a feeling that I was going to enjoy it, but I didn't think that I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. I really enjoyed learning about the magic, number one. So in this, the magic system is basically these constructs or like these creatures that are controlled by like these basically bone fragments that have commands written on them, and you stick them into the constructs, and that's how they're basically controlled. In a nutshell, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically what it is, and I enjoyed learning about that. And then the different POVs, there are several, and then there is one POV in here that is very vague, and you don't get a lot from that particular POV. And for me, it was kind of hard to piece together what exactly that had to do with anything that was going on. But once it started to come together and make sense, I really enjoyed it. And I just loved reading from all the POVs. And sometimes that can be kind of hard for me, because when there is a story that has multiple POVs, it can make it hard, because I would find myself kind of preferring to read from one POV over the other. But in this one, I enjoyed them all. I mean, yes, my favorite one was Jovis, but I still enjoyed reading from each of the other POVs. I also liked how this one had kind of like a mystery feel behind it, because we're trying to figure out, you know, what the magic system is. Obviously, you're trying to do that in any kind of fantasy book, but we're trying to figure out what this magic has to do with what's going on with Lynn, what the heck is going on with her father and this empire, and how all these other POVs are kind of tied together. And then I liked the political intrigue. This has queer representation in there. I just loved everything about this book. I cannot wait to start the next one, which I already have, which is the one back here with the blue spine. So I really enjoyed this one. If you have not picked this one up and you want to, I suggest you do. So highly recommend. So then the next book that I picked up is called Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton. And this, I believe, is going to be the first book in a duology, but this is an adult sci-fi novel. And this one follows our main character by the name of Mickey Barnes. And at the beginning of this, he is on a planet with a group of other like scientists, and he is what we know as an expendable. And so his job is basically to take on these dangerous assignments that potentially can get him killed. But being an expendable, what that means is if he does get killed, they can just make a clone of him and he can go on to the next job. So at the beginning of this, he is on iteration number 7 of himself. So he is technically Mickey number 7. And so at the beginning of this, he was on a job, he falls down this hole, and his so-called friend thinks that he is dead. So they go ahead write him off as dead, and they are going to make Mickey number 8. Well, Mickey 7 is actually not dead. He makes it back to the home base, which is known as the Dome. When he gets back to his room, he runs into Mickey number 8. Well, there's not supposed to be 2 iterations of Mickey at a time. There's only supposed to be one of him. So Mickey number 7 and Mickey number 8 decide to keep it to themselves that there are 2 of them. So they concoct this plan that they are not going to tell anyone that there's 2 of them, and they're going to try to keep this a secret for as long as possible. Well, we all know that that is not going to last. So the story kind of takes off from there with Mickey number 7 and Mickey number 8 trying to keep this a secret that there's 2 of them. But while they're trying to keep that a secret, there's also something else strange that is going on this planet that could potentially cause harm to everyone that's living on this planet. So I really loved this book. I had a feeling that this was going to be something that I was going to love when I picked this up, but I didn't realize how much I was going to love it. Now, I am not somebody that picks up science fiction. When you say something is science fiction, it's probably something I'm going to be like, that doesn't really seem like something I'm going to like. But when I was hearing people describe this one, I was like, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a try. And I'm so happy I did. I really enjoyed this. I thought this book was hilarious. I loved like the interaction between Mickey 7 and Mickey 8. I loved them trying to keep this a secret from people. I loved the characters in here. I loved like how sarcastic like Mickey 7 and Mickey 8 were with each other. I just loved the character of Mickey 7. I really think this is more character focused than plot focused. There is like a plot in there somewhere, but again, I don't think that the plot is the main focus of this book. I really think that it is all about Mickey 7. We do get some background on Mickey and how he became an expendable and what brought him to this job, because let's face it, nobody actually wants to be an expendable. Nobody wants to take on these, you know, assignments that could possibly get you killed. And everybody that works on this planet with him kind of look down on him because they don't really view him as an actual person, because he has died so many times. So are you really a person at this point? So I just loved getting his background to really see what drew him to want to be an expendable and how like all of this came to be in the first place. So I really love this. So I ended up giving this a 4 stars though. The only reason why I rated this one a 4 stars instead of a 5, especially with me saying how much I love this, was because every time we got to like the sciencey bits of this, I was lost. And it just took me out. Every time we got there, I just felt myself like spacing out. And I would just kind of like start skimming over that because I was like, okay, let me get back to the story because you lost me with all the science bits. But other than that, I really liked the story. I cannot wait to get the conclusion, because I mean, it did kind of, I guess, sort of leave off to where you can get like a second book out of this. I would have been okay if this was just like a standalone, but if I can get more Mickey 7, I'm fine with it. So I definitely love this one and can't wait for the next one. So then the next book that I picked up was The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. And this is the first book in the Poppy War series. And this is an adult fantasy novel. And so, right off, I was slightly disappointed by this. I feel like I am one of the last people to start this series. But I think I let the hype get to me on this one. I still for the most part, enjoyed it, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I was hoping to. So this one follows our main character by the name of Ren, and this takes place in like China in the 20th century. And so she just passed her test to get into the Sign Guard Academy, which is this really elite military academy. And she worked really hard to get there. She was trying to escape the life that she was living. She's a war orphan. If she didn't go to this school, she was basically going to be married off to this man that was like 3 times her age. And the people that she was living with was only going to marry her off in order to import more opium. Luckily, she ends up getting into this academy. And while she's there, there's a war that's starting to brew in the background. She also learns while she's studying at the school that she has a power that she wasn't aware that she had. There's a point in this that the kids at this school have to end up going to war. And then she learns that she's going to have to put her power to use way before she is ready to use it. And that is basically what the story is about. There were some things that I really liked about this, and then there were some things that I feel like I had a few issues with. And the things that I really liked about this was the book was split up into like 3 parts. And part 1 was all about them at this academy. And that's the part of the story that I really enjoyed the most, because I feel like that's where I really enjoyed Ren the most. I feel like at the beginning of the story, she was really determined. She was really motivated. She really wanted to get into the school. She really wanted to prove to everybody that she was good enough to be here. And I felt like that was where she was the strongest. I felt like after part 1 was where we saw a real big shift in Ren's character. And with that being said, I'm going to go to the next part of what I liked, was how this author really portrayed war and how realistic she made war appear in this novel. And what I mean by that is, when they were in school, like I said before in the synopsis, a war basically broke out and they had to leave school early and fight in this war. And basically that's what happens. When war happens, everything stops and you have to fight. And that's very real. And that's exactly what happened in this story. And I liked how all of that was very realistic. I also liked other characters in this book. I liked Ren and her friend Katay's character. I liked her instructor Jiang's character in here, and how he was like the oddball instructor, and how he just wanted to teach Ren the right way, and how he actually cared about Ren and her success. I liked the student Alton and like his background story and why he was the way that he was. To me, he had like a heartbreaking story. I liked that, and I liked him. And I also liked the power, like the magic in the system, and how, you know, they have to call upon the gods and how all of that worked. So I did like those things. What I did not like was, like I said before, was how after part 1 in the story, like Ren's character took a turn. After, you know, part 1 and we started getting into like the war, I just felt like we got a totally different side of Ren, and she was no longer this like determined, motivated person. It was like 1 minute she was like this scared little girl again, and then 1 minute she wanted to like fight everybody, and then she would like flip-flop all the time. And I didn't understand why she was like that. I would have rather preferred she be one way or the other consistently throughout the story in her build up to one person, rather than her just go back and forth. I didn't like that, because I never knew from page to page which Ren I was going to get. And then with this story being split up into different parts, I just felt like in my opinion, each of those parts could have been its own separate book. For some reason, I've not been spoiled for this series at all, as much as people have talked about it. So I don't know what to expect from the last 2 books in this series. I feel like I have heard by the time we get to the finale, quite a few people don't really care for that book. But these different parts in here, I think they could have been its own book. Like, we could have gotten a whole book of Ren and those characters learning at the Sign Guard Academy. Like, we could have gotten a whole book about that. And then in part 2, it was when they started to go to war and her going and her being with the psych. I feel like that could have been its own thing, because that was another thing that I liked. I liked her being with the psych and all of those characters. I liked that. I could have gotten a whole book about that. Why didn't we get that? Could have been its whole book. And then part 3, it was kind of like we started to get like the aftermath of what everything they went through in part 2. To me, that could have been its own book. Part 3 brings me to another thing that I did not like. Now, this is a very dark and gritty book. There are a lot of trigger warnings for this. You can find those trigger warnings, content warnings, whatever warning you want to call them, everywhere. A few of those would be, you know, there's a lot of drug use in here. I mentioned, you know, the opium in the beginning, but there's drug use, rape, genocide, classism, racism, probably some that I'm missing in there. But this book is very, very dark. You can kind of see the tone throughout parts 1 and 2. But I feel like as soon as part 3 hits, the tone of this book got extremely dark. And it was almost to the point where it was really jarring with how dark. It was like all those triggers came in part 3. Like all of them. And it was almost to the point, it just felt like I was reading a different book. And I was just like, I don't understand. Not to the point to where it just bothered me to where I didn't want to read it anymore. It just felt like a really different shift in the book. And that's why I say, like, each of these parts to me could have been a different book, because I really felt like I read 3 different books all in this one book. I ended up rating this one a 3 stars because I felt like I had equal things that I liked and disliked. I liked this book enough to want to read the next book, especially with how this ended and how Ren's character was by the time this ended. I kind of want to see what I'm going to get in the next book. I'm kind of nervous to see what I'm going to get in the next book and like how I'm going to feel when I get there. Just by what I've said so far, if you guys have read book 2, I think the second book is like the Dragon Republic. Like, did you guys like book 2? Like, if you've read this series, did you like truly enjoy the whole series? Like, am I crazy? Or, I don't know. I'm not sure. But I just thought this was okay. It wasn't the 5-star read that I thought I was going to get. Like I said, I like it enough to want to keep going, but I am nervous to pick up the second book. And then the last book that I have that I picked up recently, I just finished this one, is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. And this is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. And this is like, I think this is going to be like a book of like novellas, I think. But I actually picked this one up because I loved Mickey 7 so much that I was like, I need recommendations for like fun science fiction books. And so one of my friends was like, well, based off of what you told me about Mickey 7, I think you would like the Murderbot Diaries. So I like ran out, bought this one, and read it. So this one follows an AI It calls itself Murderbot. It's actually considered like a sec unit. And basically what sec units are is they work for this company. They get contracted out. This one in particular got contracted out to a group of scientists. These scientists are on this planet. They're performing a bunch of tests. While they are performing these tests, they realize that they have gotten hacked. Murderbot and these scientists are trying to figure out what is going on. And in this, Murderbot, all it wants to do is protect these scientists. It just needs to make sure that nothing comes to harm these scientists. That's all it's really trying to do. Make sure these scientists are okay, they get whatever job that they're doing done, and then it goes on about its business and probably just gets contracted out to somebody else. That's all it's trying to do. That's all it wants to do. But because of the situation that has happened with them getting hacked, Murderbot has to end up working with these scientists way more than it needs to, and it's not really all that happy. So the story kind of takes off from there. I thought that this was a fun time. I ended up rating this one 3 stars. The reason why I only gave it 3 stars, even though I feel like it was a fun time, was because I didn't really care for the plot of this, trying to figure out like why they got hacked. I didn't care about the plot of this. I really enjoyed like Murderbot as a character. Like I said, Murderbot just wants to do his job and be left alone. It has this function where it was able to like hack into its own system and not really take orders from them. But it also has the ability to like download entertainment programming where it can watch like basically TV shows, and all it wants to do is watch TV shows, do its job with protecting them from not harming each other and getting harmed from anything else, and that's it. And so I just loved the character of Murderbot. It's just like this shy, socially awkward AI that just wants to watch TV. And so I just love the character. When it does have to interact with the scientists, or aka humans, it's really awkward. The banter between them is hilarious to me. And like I said, I didn't really care for the plot, but the way that this ended and how in the direction of where this second novella is going to go, I believe that I'm going to enjoy that and that plot way more than what the plot of this one was. But still, I thought this was a fun time, and this is exactly what I was looking for after what I read for Mickey 7. So if you guys haven't read this and you're looking for a fun time with like an adult science fiction, or if you haven't read an adult science fiction before and you're looking for a good introduction for an adult science fiction, I would definitely recommend this, or Mickey 7 as a good introduction into adult science fiction. Because like I said, I don't read a lot of adult science fiction, and I thought both of those were great starts. So even though I gave this one 3 stars, I still thought this was a good time. Well, that is all that I have for you guys. So I will see you guys next time. Bye.